like the breeze, country road, sing.
For 25 years, John Denver stood as an icon of American folk music, his voice as warm as a campfire, his lyrics as nostalgic as a country road. But behind the soothing melodies and embroidered Western shirts was a man grappling with deep personal demons, career betrayal, and a haunting love of the skies that would ultimately cost him everything. Once RCA Records' golden boy, Denver was dropped without warning, and by the end of his life, he had lost more than just his recording contract. His pilot's license had been revoked due to his drinking, his marriages had ended in bitterness, and yet, against all odds, he kept flying even when he wasn't legally allowed to. When his experimental aircraft crashed into the Pacific Ocean on October 12, 1997, the world mourned a beloved artist. But what investigators later uncovered shocked even his closest fans. The crash was entirely preventable. Warning signs had been everywhere. No one had listened. John Denver was born Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. on December 31, 1943, in Roswell, New Mexico, into a family defined by military discipline and a love for the skies. His father, Captain Henry Dutch Deutschendorf, was a decorated Air Force pilot who broke speed records in the B-58 Hustler bomber and was eventually inducted into the Air Force Hall of Fame. Yet, despite his father's achievements, young John struggled with the constant relocations of military life. From Arizona to Alabama to Texas, he never stayed anywhere long enough to form lasting friendships. That constant uprooting left him with a permanent sense of loneliness and disconnection, a feeling that would become central to the music he later wrote. When he was 11 years old and living in Tucson, Arizona, John's grandmother gave him an old Gibson guitar built in 1910. That instrument became a lifeline. As a boy without roots, the guitar gave him something steady. He poured his loneliness into its strings, and through music, he finally found a way to express emotions he didn't have the words for. He began singing with the Tucson Boys Chorus, where he discovered harmony, stage presence, and perhaps for the first time, a sense of belonging. By the time he reached high school, he was performing folk songs at small gigs and writing music that reflected his inner world. Despite his passion, John's path initially seemed aimed elsewhere. He enrolled in Texas Tech University to study architecture, but soon realized he couldn't quiet the music inside him. He left college and moved to Los Angeles, where he began pursuing his dream full-time. It was there he adopted the stage name Denver, inspired by the Colorado landscapes he loved. In 1965, after beating out 250 other singers, he became the new lead vocalist for the Chad Mitchell Trio. For 2 years, he toured the country, recording 3 albums and slowly learning the ropes of the music business. During that period, he wrote Leaving on a Jet Plane, which Peter, Paul, and Mary turned into a massive hit in 1969. Though his name wasn't yet known, his lyrics had entered the American consciousness. In 1971, Denver released the album Poems, Prayers, and Promises, a breakthrough moment in his career. It featured what would become one of his most beloved songs, Take Me Home, Country Roads. Initially plagued by technical issues, the song almost failed to launch, but Denver's manager Jerry Weintraub pushed it relentlessly to radio stations in Colorado. The gamble paid off. By late August, the song climbed to number 2 on the Billboard charts, earned gold certification, and eventually became one of America's most iconic anthems. In 2014, the state of West Virginia adopted it as an official state song. The success kept coming. In 1972, Denver released Rocky Mountain High, an ode to the natural beauty of Colorado. The title track peaked in the Billboard Top 10 and later became one of Colorado's official state songs. Between 1974 and 1975, Denver had a run few musicians ever achieved. He scored 4 #1 hits, Sunshine on My Shoulders, Annie's Song, Thank God I'm a Country Boy, and I'm Sorry. His albums went platinum and triple platinum. His 1973 greatest hits became RCA's best-selling record of all time, surpassing even Elvis Presley. John Denver wasn't just a star, he was a phenomenon. His appeal transcended genres, blending folk, country, and pop into something uniquely comforting. His signature look, long blonde hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and hand-embroidered Western shirts designed by Anna Zapp added to his down-to-earth charm. But his influence didn't stop with music. In 1977, he starred alongside George Burns in the comedy film Oh God, directed by Carl Reiner. Denver, with no acting experience, surprised everyone with his sincerity and screen presence. The film became a massive box office success, grossing over $51 million, and proved that his talents extended far beyond the stage. As his fame spread globally, Denver took bold steps to reach international audiences. He toured Europe, produced British television specials, and even became one of the first American artists to perform in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. In 1985, amid intense political tensions, he played 11 concerts across the USSR, including stops in Moscow and Leningrad. His performances served as cultural diplomacy, acts of peace through song. He returned in 1987 to support victims of the Chernobyl disaster, raising over $140,000 for relief efforts. In 1992, Denver brought his music to China, performing in multiple cities and broadcasting one concert to over 2 billion viewers. Back home, Denver became a strong advocate for causes he believed in. He co-founded the World Hunger Project and created the WinStar Foundation to support environmental and humanitarian efforts. His album Homegrown, released in the 1990s, donated every cent of its earnings to homeless shelters. Despite his wholesome public image, Denver wasn't afraid to stand up for artists' rights either. In 1985, he testified before the U.S. Senate against music censorship. Calmly but firmly, he explained how his song Rocky Mountain High had once been mistaken for a drug reference and how censorship threatened artistic freedom. But behind the activism and accolades, Denver's personal life was unraveling. His first marriage to Annie Martell began beautifully. They adopted 2 children, and he famously wrote Annie's song for her in just 10 minutes. But fame took its toll. Annie struggled with his constant touring and the attention he received. Their relationship became strained. After a particularly bitter argument about some trees she had cut down, John returned to their Aspen home with a chainsaw and, in a symbolic act of rage, sawed their bed in half. Their divorce in 1982 revealed more than just a failed marriage. It pulled back the curtain on a darker, more volatile side of Denver. Allegations of abuse, outbursts, and emotional volatility surfaced. Friends and insiders confirmed the reports. His image as a gentle, nature-loving singer began to fracture. In 1985, Denver met Australian singer and actress Cassandra Delaney while she was performing in a Sydney hotel bar. Struck by her natural beauty and warm voice, he pursued her with relentless charm. Their courtship moved quickly, too quickly, as some close friends would later recall. Within 3 years, they were married in a lavish mountaintop ceremony in Aspen, Colorado in 1988. The event had all the markings of a modern fairy tale: celebrity guests, breathtaking scenery, and a love story that seemed destined for happily ever after. A year later, their daughter, Jessie Belle Denver, was born, an unexpected miracle for Denver, who had long believed he was sterile from a childhood illness. Her arrival was a moment of wonder for him, a second chance at fatherhood. But behind the picture-perfect family portrait, tensions were already mounting. Cassandra later revealed that the pressures of living in John's shadow were immense. The public saw a man who sang about love, peace, and gentle moments under mountain skies. Privately, she saw something else entirely. She spoke of mood swings, intense jealousy, and a home ruled by emotional volatility. Friends and staff began to notice it, too. Assistants quit suddenly. Housekeepers whispered about angry outbursts. Secretaries often left in tears. What had seemed like a dream quickly turned into a slow-burning nightmare. Jessie's birth, while joyful, brought even more pressure. John became fiercely protective, reportedly to the point of paranoia. Cassandra described an increasingly claustrophobic environment where her every move was monitored and questioned. The couple grew emotionally distant, and by 1991, they had separated. Their divorce, finalized in 1993, was a high-stakes, public battle that left both parties bruised. Denver sued Delaney for $3 million, claiming she had humiliated him and damaged his reputation. She fought for full custody of Jessie, detailing emotional abuse and psychological manipulation in court filings. In his 1994 autobiography Take Me Home, Denver acknowledged that the relationship had crumbled in part due to his own actions. He admitted to being more physical than he should have been and confessed that he struggled with jealousy and rage. While he never outright denied Cassandra's accusations, his admissions painted a tragic picture: a man deeply wounded by fame, personal demons, and a desperate need for control. What remains most heartbreaking is how the love that once seemed destined to heal him only revealed how unhealed he truly was. The marriage that began with music, passion, and a shared dream ended in silence, bitterness, and broken trust, a microcosm of the contradictions that defined Denver's later years. In 1994, Denver released his autobiography Take Me Home, and the revelation stunned even his most loyal fans. He confessed to using marijuana, LSD, and cocaine. He admitted to cheating in both marriages and acknowledged moments of physical aggression. He didn't try to sugarcoat anything. He owned up to the darkest parts of himself, writing about how rage and pain had consumed him in ways that often contradicted the man his fans thought they knew. By the mid-1980s, even his once flourishing music career had begun to fade. RCA Records, the label that had stood beside him through 25 albums, helping turn his name into a household brand, quietly dropped him in 1986. There was no grand farewell, no tribute to the man who had once outsold Elvis Presley on their label. Despite delivering RCA's all-time best-selling album, John Denver's Greatest Hits, and racking up 13 gold and 8 platinum records, the company saw no future for him in an era now dominated by drum machines, neon music videos, and the explosive rise of MTV. His acoustic sound and message of peace felt to executives outdated in a pop culture landscape driven by flashy visuals and synthesizers. The split came just after Denver had completed his final album for RCA, One World. He believed the contract renewal was a formality, his legacy was concrete after all, but the phone call never came. RCA had moved on. For John, it was more than a business decision, it was personal. He later admitted he felt betrayed, abandoned by the very company he had helped make millions. The rejection left him stunned, but not silenced. Refusing to fade away quietly, Denver founded his own label, Windstar Records, based in Aspen, Colorado. There, he continued to create music on his own terms, free from corporate interference, but also without the marketing firepower of a major label. This was a defining moment of artistic integrity. He could have changed his sound, pandered to trends, or chased radio hits. But he didn't. Instead, he doubled down on his core identity, writing about love, nature, social justice, and hope. He used Windstar not only to produce his own albums, but also to support environmental education and humanitarian projects. Yet the absence of RCA's global reach meant his new music rarely found its way to mainstream audiences. Sales dipped, radio airplay dwindled. To the industry, he was a relic of a gentler time. But to those who still listened, Denver's music became even more powerful because it now came from a man singing not for fame, but because he still had something to say. His fall from corporate grace became a symbol of the music industry's cold realities. Past success doesn't guarantee loyalty, and legends can be forgotten when the charts chase youth and novelty. But in losing RCA, Denver may have gained something deeper, a freedom to sing for the right reasons, not just the profitable ones. With his musical relevance declining, Denver turned increasingly to his lifelong passion, flying. Over the years, he had accumulated over 2,700 flight hours and held multiple pilot ratings. But trouble was brewing there too. In the 1990s, Denver was arrested twice for driving under the influence. The Federal Aviation Administration revoked his medical certification, which rendered his pilot's license useless. Denver ignored their orders, refusing to open certified letters from the FAA. For months, he continued flying in a legal gray area. It wasn't until March 1997 that he finally signed for one of the FAA's notices, officially grounding him. From that day forward, every flight he took was illegal, and yet he kept flying. On October 12, 1997, just months after receiving his final warning, John Denver climbed into a newly purchased, experimental aircraft known as a Long Easy. He had owned the plane for less than 24 hours. It had multiple design flaws, including a fuel selector switch located behind the pilot's left shoulder, a position that forced Denver to twist uncomfortably in his seat while flying. Even worse, the selector valve was stiff and required pliers to operate. The fuel gauges were behind him too, and the readings were vague and inaccurate. That day, he ran one tank dry while performing takeoffs and landings off the coast of Monterey, California. Witnesses on the beach recalled hearing the engine sputter, followed by an eerie silence. Then came the unmistakable sound of a stall. Something was wrong. Denver, alone in the cockpit of his experimental Long Easy aircraft, reached behind his left shoulder in a desperate attempt to switch fuel tanks. But the control valve wasn't just inconveniently placed, it was dangerously flawed. It required excessive force to operate and, worse, needed a pair of pliers just to turn. As he twisted awkwardly in his seat, trying to manipulate the valve while maintaining flight, he accidentally pressed the right rudder pedal. The aircraft pitched sharply downward and, within seconds, nosedived into the chilly Pacific Ocean. John Denver was killed instantly. Projects. Yet the absence of RCA's global reach meant his new music rarely found its way to mainstream audiences. Sales dipped, radio airplay dwindled. To the industry, he was To the industry, he was a relic of a gentler time. But to those who still listen, Denver's music became even more powerful because it now came from a man singing not for fame, but because he still had something to say. His fall from corporate grace became a symbol of the music industry's cold realities. Past success doesn't guarantee loyalty, and legends can be forgotten when the charts chase youth and novelty. But in losing RCA, Denver may have gained something deeper, a freedom to sing for the right reasons, not just the profitable ones. With his musical relevance declining, Denver turned increasingly to his lifelong passion, flying. Over the years, he had accumulated over 2,700 flight hours and held multiple pilot ratings. But trouble was brewing there too. In the 1990s, Denver was arrested twice for driving under the influence. The Federal Aviation Administration revoked his medical certification, which rendered his pilot's license useless. Denver ignored their orders, refusing to open certified letters from the FAA. For months, he continued flying in a legal gray area. It wasn't until March 1997 that he finally signed for one of the FAA's notices, officially grounding him. From that day forward, every flight he took was illegal, and yet he kept flying. On October 12, 1997, just months after receiving his final warning, John Denver climbed into a newly purchased experimental aircraft known as a Long Easy. He had owned the plane for less than 24 hours. It had multiple design flaws, including a fuel selector switch located behind the pilot's left shoulder, a position that forced Denver to twist uncomfortably in his seat while flying. Even worse, the selector valve was stiff and required pliers to operate. The fuel gauges were behind him too, and the readings were vague and inaccurate. That day, he ran one tank dry while performing takeoffs and landings off the coast of Monterey, California. Witnesses on the beach recalled hearing the engine sputter, followed by an eerie silence. Then came the unmistakable sound of a stall. Something was wrong. Denver, alone in the cockpit of his experimental Long Easy aircraft, reached behind his left shoulder in a desperate attempt to switch fuel tanks. But the control valve wasn't just inconveniently placed, it was dangerously flawed. It required excessive force to operate and, worse, needed a pair of pliers just to turn. As he twisted awkwardly in his seat, trying to manipulate the valve while maintaining flight, he accidentally pressed the right rudder pedal. The aircraft pitched sharply downward and, within seconds, nosedived into the chilly Pacific Ocean. John Denver was killed instantly. The crash was not only tragic, it was tragically avoidable. Denver had purchased the aircraft just one day prior. He had logged only 30 minutes of flight time in it during a brief orientation with a Czech pilot. The plane itself had been heavily modified by previous owners, and Denver, despite being an experienced aviator, had not yet mastered its quirks. Key instruments were in odd places. The fuel gauges were behind him, requiring a handheld mirror to read. Even then, the readings were misleading. What looked like a quarter tank often meant just a few gallons remained. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board would later confirm that both fuel tanks were critically low, approximately 3 gallons in the left tank and 6 in the right. He never had enough fuel to safely complete the flight. Perhaps most haunting is the symbolism in that final moment. Denver, a man whose greatest joys were soaring above mountains and oceans, spent his last seconds struggling, not with nature, but with human error and mechanical oversight. His final flight wasn't marked by recklessness or bravado, but by a fatal combination of flawed engineering, poor planning, and a system that allowed him to fly despite clear warnings. It was an ending as heartbreaking as it was ironic. A man who sang about peace and freedom from the cockpit lost his life to the very sky he had so long worshipped. The National Transportation Safety Board's investigation revealed multiple contributing factors: insufficient fuel, lack of familiarity with the aircraft, and dangerous cockpit modifications. Despite being an experienced pilot, Denver had not fully prepared for the unique demands of this experimental plane. The board concluded that the crash was entirely preventable. John Denver's life ended not with a final note, but with a tragic silence over the ocean. He was 53 years old. His legacy is complicated, equal parts light and shadow. He was a singer who gave voice to nature and peace, an artist who brought Americans closer to the land and each other. He was also a man who battled addiction, failed marriages, and emotional darkness. And yet, perhaps what makes his story so deeply human is that it holds both joy and pain. His music continues to comfort, inspire, and heal. His life, in all its beauty and flaws, serves as a reminder that even the gentlest souls carry burdens we may never fully see. Despite his struggles, John Denver never stopped trying to use his voice for good. He was one of the first celebrities to sound the alarm on environmental destruction at a time when few public figures dared to speak up. He didn't just sing about nature, he fought to protect it. In the 1970s and 80s, he testified before Congress about wilderness preservation, championed clean energy, and helped establish the WinStar Foundation, a nonprofit that educated future generations about sustainable living. He often said music does bring people together. It allows us to experience the same emotions, and he used that unifying power in pursuit of causes larger than himself. His concerts weren't just performances, they were experiences. He would pause between songs to tell stories, to speak about the earth, about kindness, about hope. One moment, he'd be strumming Rocky Mountain High to thousands under open skies. The next, he'd be sitting quietly with a child at a benefit event, singing softly as if only for them. That was the dichotomy of John Denver, the stadium star who felt just as comfortable in a quiet forest clearing. And though the spotlight faded in his final years, his songs never did. Perhaps Love, Calypso, Fly Away, they live on, echoing in national parks, roadside diners, and family gatherings. His lyrics weren't built on ego or flash. They were simple, heartfelt, and sincere. And that sincerity is why they endure. In the end, John Denver's story isn't just about fame or tragedy. It's about longing for home, for peace, for something pure in an often noisy, complicated world. And maybe, just maybe, that's why his music still matters. Because deep down, we're all looking for a place to belong. And John Denver gave us one. John Denver sang about home, about belonging, about finding peace in the wide open skies. And though his final flight ended in tragedy, his songs still echo on country roads, mountain highs, and through the hearts of those who continue to listen.